This time on Captain Castle's Laboratory, we're going to be working on the Hawthorne Village Skating Pond Delight. So, it doesn't work. That's why it's here. So, I'll turn it on. That's supposed to turn and play music. So there's two motors. One motor's turning, but one of the gears isn't. And this motor turned when I first got it out of its package, and then it quit. So somebody else worked on it because the bottom was taped on. So I peeled the tape off, and here's the internals and internals. Jeez. And the wires are, well, taped together and spliced. So yeah, no big deal. So anyhow, this motor, where's the easiest way to see this thing? That way. That motor there is turning. This motor here is not. This one plays the music. This one turns the deck. Now, this gear here is turning. This gear at the other end of the shaft is not. So we probably have a cracked gear. So let's take it apart. And this is going to be the first Hawthorne Village piece I've taken apart. So it's got a compression C-clamp. There's a whole bunch of nicknames for it. So you can call it whatever you want. This big disc looks good. The gear has two screws to hold the gear on. It's a magnet. Very magnetic. I'm going to set this. I want to set it somewhere where I won't attract any metal flake and also not stick to anything. So there we go. Alright, so underneath we got 3 screws in a triangle. And I think somebody has opened already because they're stripped out. Like, there we go. No problem. Bigger screwdriver, a little pressure, and there we go. 1, 2, and 3. So these music box type pieces are interesting. A lot of people think they're too loud. I'm one of those. So here we go. So the thin red and blue wire is the motor that drives the disc. The thick red and white wire is the motor that drives the music box. Alright, so we have 3 screws, it looks like. You got 3 screws holding the motor in. That's pretty amazing. Last time it's only 2. High torque motors might have 4, but those are high torque. Sorry for the horn that's going by. Happens multiple times a day, every day. There we go. This belt's a little loose. See about replacing it. There is an obscene amount of grease in here, but it's maintained in the box and not on the motor, so that's a positive. So now let's slide out this and see that, wow, there's definitely a broken gear. You can see there's a chunk of it missing. So that would be the 3. It's in 2 pieces almost. It's cracked on both sides. Wow, it's barely staying together. It's brittle. Let's check this gear. Gear looks good. Had some paper towel, but apparently it's gone. Just wiping the excess grease off the shaft. And let's look at the 2 gears here. So this is an older piece. It's dated 2005, so it's going on to 20 years old. And this motor here is just like on the Lemax. It's a SRF 300 CA, 11,400 RPM. This motor isn't, it's completely different, but we'll get to that one once we get this part fixed. So we need a gear. So this looks like a 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is an 8 tooth, which is up in this upper left hand corner. Real fast, let's check this worm gear, make sure we're good. Yeah, we're good. I like to check all the gears because you never know. Now comes the fun part of pressing this in. Alright, so it's pressed in halfway up the knurling. I'm using the flat of the pliers onto the actual axle shaft to press. Don't want to press on the gear. And now I'm going to try and push it on a little further. I'm using the hole in the pliers to allow the shaft to go below the gear. If you've never seen me do this before. Not quite yet. All right, well, it's covering the knurling. Let's see if that was good enough. Nope, not on far enough. You just go down a little bit more. You don't want to push it too far on because it's sometimes a pain to go the other direction. Perfect. Look at that. All right, let's put the top back on and see how it goes. Go. Looks like this gearbox was used for other things because it has holes on the side for output shafts and raised sections for other sideways gears or worm gears. So this is probably a generic box that could be used in multiple pieces in multiple configurations. Gear is covered in, or excuse me, this belt's covered in grease, so I'm just gonna wipe it off and then try it. It wasn't slipping, but I think, there we go. All right, make sure none of the wires are touching since they're exposed. Now it's completely spinning. There we go. Alright, so that one wasn't too bad. And the belt's not slipping. And the belt's actually pretty good. I think what I was feeling before was the fact that it had grease on it. Now, that's just the first one. Now we got to figure out this guy. Why is this one not turning at all? When I first got it and I plugged in the extension to make sure it worked, it was in the on position and started playing music for, I don't know, 3 or 4 seconds before I turned it off, and now it's not. I don't know why, but we're going to find out. Could be the connection here. Could have been that it was just stuck on a note. I don't know. But I'm going to disconnect the wire since they're just twisted. Pull this out. And I'm going to make sure we got power coming out of the circuit board properly. This motor is an SX001. which is an odd designation. I don't even see how they got this motor in. There's no mounting screw. Oh, looks like it's soldered to the housing. That might pose an issue. Alrighty, let's do some chatting here. So what I want to do is see if what we got coming out of the circuit board. I'm just going to walk around. About 2.5 volts. There we go. So we have 2.5 volts coming out of the circuit board. So I am going to set my power supply at 2.5 volts, like so. The motor does work. I think it was just a bad connection. That's better. So there's something on the tooth of the gear. I want to get it off the gear tooth. That way it doesn't pose any issues. I can see it when it's spinning fast in the light. Just trying to stop it with it up. There's some crap in the teeth. Right here. Probably grease and dirt because there's grease on the metal plate too. So I think some stuff just fell into it. I'm going to check the worm gear. I'm checking the other gears. These gears, unfortunately, when they break, become a problem. This shaft, you'd have to find one similar from another music box, and same with this black gear. They're usually black from music boxes. The barrel is usually always white, but I'll let you know when you take this apart, there's generally a wound spring behind it. So you got to be very careful. Alright, let's see if that changes with the so as far as the chunk, it didn't change much, but at least it's not in there anymore to cause an issue. Alright, so I am going to actually solder the wires on versus just twisting them and covering them in a piece of electrical tape that fell off when I took the tape that held the bottom on off. And I'm also going to heat shrink them so that way it's a little more secure. So as far as this motor goes, if it goes out and it's the actual motor and you didn't break one of the gears, you're going to have to unscrew these two screws that are right here and then pull this whole plate assembly out. You're going to have to be careful of this shaft here. It'll slide right out when you pull it out, so pull it towards this standoff and then move this out of the way. This motor is soldered to this board, and then the back of this is soldered to the back of the board as well, so it helps keep it centered. You can buy motors like this that run at 3 volts or 2 volts. They'll run at lower voltages. And you just have to resolder it back on if this motor dies. But honestly, I've worked on a dozen different music boxes from different manufacturers. Again, this is the first Hawthorne. And I've never had the motor fail. I've had the gear break, which luckily I was able to get a replacement. I had one. I tend to keep stuff. And then I've had the motor not want to turn, but that wasn't because the motor was bad, it's because it, again, had a broken gear. And I've had it where the worm gear, the gear right here on the front of the motor, had broke, where I just took the bracket off and then slid a new worm gear on and then reassembled the bracketry. So these tapered nose motors, they seem to last a long time, but there's less moving parts to them as well. Also, the cord on this is really short. I just haven't untwisted the extension. Let it tip back a little so I can see. All right. So red. I cut the wires inside the unit, which makes it a little harder to get to. I usually cut the wires closer to the motor. That's how I do it, but everybody does things differently. I'll put a little more light on here. It might swamp out the camera a little. That's because I need to make sure I get a good twist and solder joint, and I need to be able to see. Not getting a good twist. That's going to make for a crappy solder joint. So if you have this piece and you do have to cut the wires, make sure you cut it where you have enough room to reattach them. I recommend that on all pieces, actually. I'd rather have too much wire and then trim it later, or find a new way to tuck it, than not enough wire and then you're fighting your hand size to get into the area because there's no space. There we go. Now let's solder this one so it doesn't come apart. Now the circuit board is just glued inside this hole. It's probably glued right next to where the on-off switch is, because it looks like the circuit board encompasses the on-off switch as well as the power port. Mr. Christmas is good at doing that. So it's not an uncommon fashion or uncommon way of doing things. Now the red wire is slightly longer. I wanted to do the harder one first. That way the easier one is not in my way of the harder one. So what I do is I take the two ends that are stripped and I twist them together in like a bread tie, and then I solder them. And then I fold them flat and then slide the heat shrink over them. There we go. And if you notice, this extension's a 3-head adapter because this piece has multiple pieces in it. Screw it, I'll just undo the whole thing. So it's 1 in, 3 out, and that's because, again, this is just one of several pieces. This is a really big box with multiple pieces in it. I'm going to do it as a multiple part repair because the other one that needs to be fixed is I'm still trying to figure out how to get into it. So we're going to fix this one first. So I have the two wires away from each other. I want to see how it works with its own power. those aren't familiar with Hawthorne Village, they're not a very large company compared to the big three, Lee Max, Department 56, and Mr. Christmas. But I used to have the complete Munster set from them, and I donated the entire set to someone who wanted to set up their first Halloween Village display. And some people were surprised because if you went online and found that set, it's going on eBay for close to $5 grand. At least at Halloween time it was. I haven't checked it since. But I didn't have a use for it. It was dirty, dusty. Like when I say dusty, there's probably an inch of dust sitting on top of it because it was underneath the ceiling fan. And I didn't need it. And I think that entire village cost me when I got it maybe $35 because I got it at a Goodwill. And then I got some pieces donated to me. So I just passed it along. Try and keep the interest in villaging alive. I could have tried to sell it and make some money, but just pass it along. But Hawthorne Village is, I don't know, it's not horrible or anything. I mentioned a speaking event I did with a few other creators. That'll be up on YouTube eventually too. And when I said Hawthorne Village, the people in the room staring at me were like, what's that? It's like, yeah, it's not a very, very, very common piece or company, but if you ever look into them, their pieces are very ornate. They're really good on their detail work. So they just don't have a lot of things that break because most of their pieces are just lit. It's just a light bulb, and that's all. So to have this very first Hawthorne Village piece come in that was animated was actually pretty surprising. And then this piece, the skating pond from Hawthorne Village, along with the other pieces that go to it, is from the Thomas Kincaid Mistletoe Mountain set or collection. And this one is classified as sculpture, and its number is A1926. I don't know. In all Hawthorne Villages, the bottoms are green. I mean, I haven't seen one yet that isn't green, so I guess it's their color. Alright, well, she's back together. Let's plug it back in and make sure nothing's binding. The air will turn off in a minute. No, it's turning, it's turning. Alright. Up on spacer disc. That's weird. Go. Now comes the fun part. Any of you have mechanics, this little guy likes to fly. And it doesn't help that it's surrounded by magnets. I'm going to turn this off. There we go. And move it out of the way. So it keeps trying to move around. Go. No, don't move. There we go. They have a tendency of shooting off in the middle of nowhere. They have a few nicknames because of that. So this is just round and fits right in, but what I want to do is make sure that how I put it in, the wires do not get caught in the rotating assembly. That would be bad. one way to put this in. It has a notch. And that notch also keeps the wires away from the rotating assembly. It was just the opposite side I put it on. Okay, look at that. So there's the bottom. This is that green I was telling you about. It's kind of like an olive drab. Before I glue it in, though, I want to make sure that the skater skates. This goes to the other piece, but it was the first magnetic piece I pulled out. Because it says skier for the ski mountain. And I'm like, if it has a magnet, I don't really care. I just want it for testing to make sure that we get motion. Trying to find that inner, he won't stick to the inner magnets, or she, because it's the different polarity. I noticed that when I had it apart. There's that switch right there. So the polarity on the magnets, the inner magnets are reversed from the outer magnets. I thought that was also very interesting. It's not something that's super common. So if you have this piece, because the last part's just going the bottom on, and it's going to take a minute for this to get hot, and you saw how it works with the skier. It's supposed to be like an ice skater. If you have this specific piece, you just pop the bottom off. It's held on with glue, so you'll have to get the glue to break free. You can use heat if necessary. Just be careful, because that bottom disc is plastic, and plastic melts real fast in glue in heat. But once you get that out, go ahead and take a look at it and see what your failure is. This one was the 8-tooth gear. The 8-tooth gear is very common. So is a 10-tooth gear. So you can get it from Skull Crane, like my kit, or you can get it from the generic Amazon ones. I'll link them all below if you guys don't have a gear kit. You can also just buy a baggie of just 8-tooth gears, but I usually like buying the kits because it comes with a whole bunch of every size gear. Because as you saw, there was 3 other gears connected to it, and the gear kit has those gears. When you buy the big kit, the little kit just has the main transfer gears: 8, 10, 12, 16, 14-tooth gears. Motor, same as Lemax SRF 300CA or RF 300CA at 11,400 RPM. The belt, I get the little kits from Skull Crane again. There you go. And that belt's good, but it was just covered in grease. Make sure the grease isn't in or around the motor itself, just the gearbox. Wipe off any excessive grease. Helps prolong the life of the unit. The motor, that's the music box motor. That one will take a little more work, but I might have one around here. Let me check. Yeah. So this one came out with something completely different. You can tell by the resistors and diodes and the fact it's got a brass drive gear. But this motor runs at between 2 and 6 volts. So it would work in here. You would just have to remove all of this, because when you buy this motor, it does come with these smoothing capacitors already pre-soldered on. You'd remove those and then solder those pins through the board. But this is the step I'm talking about. Department 56 uses these on a lot of their older pieces too, without the metal gear. With the metal gear, it's usually for something bigger or stronger than an animated house or accessory. That's usually something that has a lot of torque involved, like a remote control car. So, but you can still do that. It's just going to take a lot more work. have to be a little bit more patient, and you do need to know how to solder. You really have to, since the bracketry is held in by the solder as well as the motor is held in with the solder, and you definitely need to put it back together with the solder since that's what holds it all together. But more modern ones use the screws. But those step motors, I don't know if you saw it or if you paid attention, there's no screw holes in the front. They're usually held in with a cage or a bracket. Some brackets are just screwed onto the motor. In this case, it's soldered on. So, but other than that, this piece is done. I'm going to let that get hot, glue the bottom on, stick it back in its box. So that concludes this one. Any questions or comments, put them below. And until the next one, have a good one.